Hello, my name is Ace, and I'm an intern here at Reconnect Rondo. In this video, we'll be providing you with historical examples of how transportation has affected BIPOC communities throughout the years. After a brief history lesson, we'll also be taking a look at how transportation investment, urban renewal, redlining, and restrictive covenants impact BIPOC communities today. Let's get started, shall we? Over the last 200 years, transportation has not only opened doors of opportunity, but it has also brought devastation and terror to millions of residents within BIPOC communities. One pattern presented throughout today's video is that although transportation usually seems to promise equality, historically, it's always favored white Americans. After the ratification of the 13th Amendment, the South implemented a collection of state and local statutes that legalized racial segregation. These statutes were then referred to as the notorious Jim Crow laws. Plessy v. Ferguson details a case where Homer Adolph Plessy challenged an 1890 law that required white and African Americans to sit in separate railroad cars. On June 7, 1892, Plessy bought a ticket from New Orleans to Covington, Louisiana. When deciding where to sit, he chose a vacant seat in a whites-only car. Once the conductor was made aware of the situation, Plessy was then asked to leave, and when he repeatedly refused, he was arrested and thrown in jail. When Plessy was convicted of violating the 1890 law, he filed a petition to the Supreme Court claiming the law violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It took 4 years for the verdict of Plessy v. Ferguson to be announced, and on May 18, 1896, the court claimed that the protections of the 14th Amendment only applied to political and civil rights, such as voting and jury service, and didn't apply to social rights, like sitting in the railroad car of your choosing. They claimed that the segregated cars for African Americans weren't any better or worse than the cars for white folks. This created the notion of separate but equal, justifying segregation in the South for years to come. This is only one example of the mistreatment BIPOC communities have faced due to transportation. It also highlights how Jim Crow laws kept African Americans from truly reaching equality in the South, creating a large motive behind the next historical event, the Great Migration. From 1910 leading up into the 70s, around 6 million African Americans moved up to the northern, midwestern, and western states of America to pursue educational and economic opportunities, escape racial injustice and violence, and attain their deserved freedoms from the hands of the Jim Crow in the South. The 60-year time frame consisted of two phases: the first Great Migration, from 1910 to 1940, and the second Great Migration, from 1940 to 1970. As great of an opportunity as this was, it's also caused tension throughout the North and Midwest. One significant event that arose from this first migration was the Red Summer of 1919. When American servicemen returned from the war, they were in disbelief to find that their communities had seen such a large demographic change. They were even more shocked and outraged to find that African Americans took their previous jobs. This caused tensions to rise throughout these northern cities, and large mobs and riots were led to intimidate and push out African American families from their well-deserved homes. It's horrific knowing that people chased opportunity and were only rewarded with the same problems they faced living in the South. Similar to the first Great Migration, the Second World War offered even more opportunities for African Americans, and there was a large migration to the West to cities such as Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. One thing these two migrations have in common is that the cities that offered the most opportunity were cities whose economic infrastructure relied heavily on transportation. Now that you know how transportation has affected BIPOC communities in the past, how does it affect these same communities today? After the Great Depression, the U.S. government made it the priority to evaluate riskiness of mortgages. To determine risk, in the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation graded cities into 4 categories. Neighborhoods made up of minorities were deemed as the worst category with the description of hazardous. These areas were outlined in red, hence the name redlining. When the Federal Housing Administration was founded in 1934, it furthered the efforts of segregation by refusing to insure mortgages near BIPOC communities due to redlining. On top of that, people of non-Caucasian descent were restricted to certain areas within the city where they could and couldn't live. These restrictions were known as restrictive covenants and served as another attempt to keeping BIPOC communities from thriving. A direct result of these actions were urban renewal, which started off as an idea promising cities funding to invest in affordable housing and help clean up impoverished parts of the city. In reality, this only ended up displacing many people of color from their homes, and any money promised to compensate these families either showed up late or, in most cases, never showed up at all. In many large cities, there is always a direct correlation between areas that were once redlined to previous and current urban renewal projects. Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago is a perfect example of this. Urban renewal isn't the only thing that displaced people of color from their homes. Transportation investment has also had a significant impact on BIPOC communities. In summary, transportation investment consists of investing in roads, railroads, inland waterways, maritime ports, and airports. When done successfully, transportation investments can create employment and connect neighborhoods. However, historically speaking, this was rarely the case. Those who made decisions on transportation seldom considered BIPOC communities and the neighborhoods being affected. One example of this would be the building of I-94 and the destruction of the Rondo neighborhood here in St. Paul. This interstate split the entire community in half and displaced thousands of people from their homes, a choice made by government officials that families are still recovering from to this day. In this video, we've briefly talked about how transportation has affected BIPOC communities throughout the years, while also giving you an example of how it's fallen short for so many of these promises. Hopefully, with this knowledge, you'll be able to gain a better understanding of why we're fighting so hard to make this project a reality. This has been Ace with Reconnect Rondo, signing off.